His 40 acres is like Skinwalker Ranch. 11 o'clock at night, saw a portal open up like the Northern Lights. I've been fascinated with Bigfoot since like I was in fourth or fifth grade. I bought a book called The Scariest Stories You've Ever Heard, not to be confused with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And it had the classic The Hook on the door story, the calls coming from inside the house story, the babysitter. And then one of them was Sasquatch. And I remember it being fascinating as it could be. And I kept thinking about that one, and it just kind of fascinated me, the subject matter. And of course, that was in the late '90s, early and late '90s, when any documentary you caught was for an hour on a Sunday, and it may or may not be on anything you cared about. And so I took in all the radio interviews on it and everything, and then fast forward to, Finding Bigfoot. I like that show, and any kind of subject matter on Bigfoot I could come across. And then I started this podcast, 2019. Wasn't going to be about Bigfoot at all. Wasn't it might have been a subject matter I was interested in for it, but I had stand-up comedians, local musicians, a guy that lived in Germany once, a World War II veteran. And then slowly and surely, the only people I could get to respond were Bigfoot witnesses, paranormal witnesses, UFO witnesses. And I found out that I really liked the Bigfoot subject the very most. And so that's why I doubled down. And that's why I changed my name, the Caffeinated Cryptid, because all I do is drink coffee and talk about Bigfoot. But I still do the other paranormal subjects, but that's it's about 70-30 Bigfoot. So that's how I kind of double down into the Bigfoot world. I'm not a witness or anything. One day I'd like to be, and I'm talking to some people that could make that happen. But for right now, I just love the stories and the commonalities of different people from across the country that say the same thing. That's what started me really fascinated with it. That's what made me addicted to it.
What are some of the more interesting stories you've heard?
Probably my favorite, there's two of them now. There was just one, but my favorite is Randy Bauer from Minnesota, Black Duck, Minnesota. His 40 acres is like Skinwalker Ranch. And he's had instances where they twisted a game camera off of his trees. He's had instances where he and a neighbor were sitting on a tree stand at like 11 o'clock at night and saw a portal open up like the Northern Lights was inside of it. He said it was like an elevator door opened, Northern Lights coming out of it, and saw two orbs come out. The orbs started crunching into leaves and eventually manifested into Bigfoot, picked something up off a gifting area and floated back into the portal and left again. That's probably the most incredible story I've heard. And then there's another story, and you may have met him, Mike Bluler. He's Roger Williams' friend. He has the best story of running into one in the Mississippi swamp while deer hunting, and it got 30 yards from his location, and he saw it actually scream in the face and what happened there. So those two are kind of neck and neck right now.
What stood out to you on those that made them be so much more phenomenal than other stories?
Well, Randy's it was the first one where I kind of realized maybe it's not just a fun subject for me anymore. Maybe it's actually real. Like maybe there's something to the actual. Maybe they can do things we can't explain. And he happened to be, I think, the third witness I talked to, but the first episode I aired, and so I noticed commonalities in the three people, one from Iowa, one from Minnesota, one from Vermont, and they all were saying the same thing. And then Randy's kind of clicked, and he had so much time in the game, and he had High Check out there, and a couple other guys, the She Squatchers. So I'm like, maybe this is real. Like he's saying the exact same stuff, except he's got a higher concentration of it. And the Mike Bluler story is just really intense because he watched a thing for probably a good hour and got within 30 yards of him for a long time.
And so what did he watch exactly? Give me more detail on that.
Oh, so Mike, his story is he was in a tree stand, he heard something walk out, and then it ran up the side, and he saw it squatting down about 100 yards away. He put it in his rifle scope and noticed it. He thought it was a bear, obviously, because it was black, and just started noticing parts of it, like the face and the lips were human-like, and the skin was kind of ashy and kind of a patchy, not a mangy, but just kind of patchy. And then it ran back toward him, and he got to see it face to face for a long time, and it screamed at him, and it came down to, long story short, it came down to him nearly having to shoot the thing to get out of the tree stand. And he said he had the scope on the thing's forehead, and something told him not to do it, and he couldn't pull the trigger. and it ran away, and he had to basically like run back to his truck like a half a mile or so with it screaming and knocking down trees a few hundred yards away the whole time. Him peeling out down the his story of peeling out down the dirt road about getting stuck is about the funniest part of it. Yeah, it was just you get just when you see him tell the story, it gets pretty intense. You can tell, much like the guy from Minnesota and a couple others, that they're not lying. Like it actually happened.
So, do you often have stories that people seem to have like a dangerous situation like that?
Mike's is more dangerous. Probably the next one in line would be Mr. Wadsworth from Vermont or New Hampshire. He saw one kill a deer with its bare hands, but that was in 1982. And it looked at him, but then it ran off with the deer. Obviously, most people just have that I talk to here, like things get thrown at them, trees get pushed down, that kind of thing. Nobody, nobody was in as much possible physical danger as Mike Bluer, I don't think. And I know there's another one out there that's probably more scary, but I've never heard it before.
It's amazing to me that there are so many people that are just oblivious to some of these, I would say, the lesser signs, some of the tree breaks and some of the rocks, throwing. If someone's throwing a rock at you, that's one thing. But I've had cases where rocks end up on top of buildings, and there's no way a rock gets on top of a building unless something throws it up there. It's very odd. Have you experienced that as well?
Yeah, I got a audio recording sent to me of barn owls, and they typically say that the Sasquatch imitate owls as one of their main go-tos. And I'm like, well, this is owls. And all of a sudden, rocks start getting thrown on the side of a shed, on top of the shed. And the anecdotal line I heard was barn owls don't typically throw rocks. And so I've heard a lot of that. Rocks getting, and last night I talked to someone that said they found a rock in an area that was active, just sitting on top of their chicken coop. So yeah, they definitely the thing they do is a thing they do.
Exactly. Yeah, rock throwing is a very common thing. And I've been out and about, and it's like rocks are normally not thrown at me, but if one was, you would think that it would really get your attention.
Especially the size they throw, like big as a Pizza Hut basketball.
Exactly. And we've been going out and doing this docuseries that I'm making right now. And we've been finding a lot of bushes that have been bent over and flattened out. That's kind of an unusual thing in the forest. Deer and things like that don't usually do that, but especially if they're berry bushes and stuff such as that. What are some of the signs that you hear about in the woods that people may be ignoring?
I think one of the things they don't ignore, but they try to do too much of the tree structures. Other signs are the ripped up bushes, like you were saying. I'm just trying to go back in my memory bank here because you get so many, like the bent over limbs, and the ones that are the ripped up and turned upside down. A lot of that going on. Also, maybe like, so we're talking about signs. Yeah, just a lot of the tree things they do. They say possible, and at the gifting areas, maybe if they don't like something, they'll turn it upside down or put an X on top of it. That's one. Okay, now one of the things Randy in Minnesota had, he asked them. He talks to him. He said, "Hey guys, it's Randy." That's how I'll address them when he goes out there. If you don't want me to put cameras out here, let me know. And like I said earlier, they twisted the game camera off the tree, the strap and everything, and put an X of limbs on top of it. So that's definitely something they use as an indicator.
Why do you think it's so hard for game cameras to get any kind of an image of them?
I think they can manipulate them. I think they have the same, common technology as like Skinwalker Ranch does. Whatever's happening there. I described it once as the extraterrestrials, the ghosts, and the Bigfoot / cryptids have like Apple Android kind of like portal technology and clipping technology, and so if they can sense it, they can get out there and maybe put an electromagnetic field. They have some kind of way to know they're there. First of all, they can probably see the IR in the dark. That's probably like grade school stuff for them because our phones can see the IR in the dark. So surely they can, but they can probably, like, they haven't gotten a video theoretically since the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and that thing was spring loaded, no electronics. So that's like a smoking gun, um, in a way to me. Like when you realize what they use for Patterson-Gimlin and what we've used since, it's actually counterintuitive. Everybody's like, well, there's 1,000 cameras on every hunting club. Well, they're all electronic, they're all digital, and Bigfoot and all those entities seem to have a way of manipulating them. I think it's almost as simple as that. Probably the best explanation.
Well, it's interesting because I've done several interviews just recently that's connecting like the ghost phenomena, the alien UFO phenomena, and Bigfoot together. What are some of the correlations other than that they can use portals that you have discovered?
The time loss is another thing. People in the areas of Bigfoot, they experience disorientation, time loss. One of Randy's favorite stories is they were walking north towards some state-owned land, found a teepee, took pictures of the teepee. When they got back, they realized that he was in the teepee that was closest to their house. And so they were manipulated into seeing something that wasn't there completely across the other part of the land. And I would have to get a murder board out like Only Sunny in Philadelphia to show you how that worked, because I couldn't. First time I heard the story, I didn't get it. But he thought he was half a mile away. The teepee they saw 100 yards from their property. And I had it all drawn out at one point. But yeah, time loss, people that experience lights in the sky driving down like a highway in Texas, they look up and it's like an hour and a half later, they're about out of gas, that kind of thing. I think that time loss and like mind manipulation is definitely one of the other commonalities. I don't know if they use it maliciously or maybe just to cover their tracks, like, oh crap, we were seen, like these aren't the droids you're looking for. I don't know what the purpose is, but it may just be a way that they keep from being discovered on a macro level.
Well, I find that really interesting, especially, because the only thing we have to develop or perceive our reality is our five senses, and then be able to reason our way through that. And these things don't fit into that realm. Is any advice to people that have these experiences, how they can correlate that into their normal processing?
Honestly, no. I think that's part of the conceptual design flaw of humans. It's almost like these entities can hit pause like on a video game and come out of it and manipulate things inside of it like a software engineer would, come back and hit play again, and there they are. I would just say keep a positive attitude and don't open yourself up for negativity. Like the aliens is one thing that if they want you, they want you. This is just for hearing the witnesses I've talked to about them. The aliens, if they want you, for whatever reason, you don't really have a choice. With the Bigfoot, you can you kind of be positive about it. They're not going to get anywhere near you if you show up with a rifle anyway, and so you're not going to have that problem. But if you do get too close, I think they will start to do that to get them away from you. And Zeus Platt from Project Sasquatch out in Colorado, he said if you get in the woods and feel a headache and start feeling that woozy feeling in your head, swimmy, he said, just turn around. He goes, it's about to start. It's not worth it. You never know what you're going to get a hold of. And well, from what we know right now, maybe that doesn't dangerous things don't happen as a result. But I think David Paulides has a whole book series on the fact that they probably do. We just don't know what happens after the fact.
No memory.
I say just pay attention. You just pay attention. And maybe the people who go missing have that happen and just keep going. And that's the end result is the extreme, loss of life or go missing. But just when you start feeling it, just back out.
That anytime you get, kind of a sense that you shouldn't go there, shouldn't go into the woods that day, to just, avoid going, because that's probably trying to tell you something.
Turn around,
go another direction. Yeah, for sure.
The inner voices.
Well, what do you think about all the people that, that really, really, really believe, and their experience backs them up on that this is just a flesh and blood creature in the woods? What would you say to them?
Well, I wouldn't say anybody's opinion's wrong at this point. It's one of the things, there's zero evidence of anything. I've never talked to anyone that's 100% flesh and blood that's ever seen one. Outside of maybe people who are like in their zone and they come to their camp. But that doesn't prove they're flesh and blood. That just proves like they're flesh and blood when they're here, which I'm 100% with when they're here, quote unquote, they're flesh and blood. But they've got to be able to do something. From all the people I've talked to, like Randy has looked at them. he's had the thing where you look down and look up and they're gone. He said one time he made sure not to look at it and he saw it disappear, and just in broad daylight in an open power line cut. The she squatcher saw two disappear up there. When they looked down and looked up, and it's gone. Something's happening. Either they can find cave systems at a moment's notice, which I'm okay with, but in an anecdotal way, I think it's easier to believe that they are some sort of paranormal, some sort of powerful. It's easier to believe that than they are just a hidden monkey in the woods that can maybe use a cave. That's just me. I just like hearing stories, but I think it's harder. It's harder for me to believe they're flesh and blood at this point, from what I've heard.
You've heard a lot of the other stories is why.
Mm-hmm.
I studied or researched UFOs for a lot of years, and there's such a correlation between those experiences and these experiences. Some people would see a craft and it was just a very physical craft. And other people saw things that just disappeared in front of their face, or they'd see an alien being. One case, this woman saw an alien in her living room and then poof, it was gone. So it also takes us back to the way we perceive information, the way our eyes work, the way we process it, the way our brain understands things. In part, we just may not understand who we are in the way of perceiving this this information.
Yeah, we could be part God as well, as I've heard before, that they're trying to squelch us with the fluoride and the frequencies, the low negative frequencies. I mean, how do people talk to the entities? People used to talk to God and stuff all the time.
But people have been seeing, ghosts, and they've been seeing a lot of unexplained characters for a long time.
And it seems like it just don't happen. It doesn't happen at the level they used to anymore.
What do you think they are? What do you think Bigfoot is?
I think he's flesh and blood while he's here. I'm 100% on that bandwagon. But he has some kind of paranormal abilities. I'm not sure what or why. I think the why hurts me more, because why would that exist? And what's the purpose of just an animal that can go in and out and hide? I mean, what are they watching something? Are they left over from the Bible, like everybody, the Nephilim crew? Like the witnesses I've talked to say, some have the hooded nose. The one Mike Blue saw Mississippi had a human face. It had black eyes, I think, but it had a hooded nose like a person. It wasn't like a mountain gorilla where it's flat face or protruded out. It had chiclet teeth. I'm not real sure what they are, but I know that or why they are, but I know that they are flesh and blood while they're here. That's one thing that I can probably agree with everybody on that. While when you see them, that is a real thing, and they can slap the side of houses. They can leave muddy fingerprints. They can obviously leave footprints. You have to have mass to do that. Effect on gravity, but other than that, I'm not sure why. Just a flesh and blood creature that may or may not be part person that can have special abilities for whatever reason.
So have you ever seen a UFO or anything like that? You said you had not had a Bigfoot encounter, but have you seen anything like a UFO or a ghost?
I've felt the presence of ghosts. My wife has seen one materialize beside me in Savannah, which made me want to leave the area. She's like, there was a soldier in there with you. I'm like, oh my God. And looking in an IR, a room that was dark, it just had our IR cameras in it. And outside the room was some monitors. And she was outside watching it while I was in there with a small group. And she said, yeah, one just materialized over there on the other side of that little couch. And at that point I was ready. To go. But yeah, it was, I've never seen one, and on that same trip in Savannah, like 2 days before, we were on this hearse tour, and our guide let us get out because he knew the owners of this house that was haunted. I mean, it was gutted. The house was probably 200 years old. You walk up and there's the giant door, like on front of all old plantation style houses. And it was open, like that, about the width of a basketball, maybe. I'm using basketball a lot today. It was open about a foot or so. And I thought that he had somebody in there going to scare us. Because I would swear to you, I saw like a pair of eyes looking around that door, and it closed a little bit. And then he walked up to it and opened it, and we all walked in and looked around, and nothing was in there. And I'm like, did anybody else see that door close like 6 or 8 inches? And like I saw something inside do it. Maybe wind, maybe nothing, but I saw something inside that wasn't It wasn't in the doorway when we walked up, but that's as far as my experience with actual ghosts go. One of my slight claim to fame to the paranormal is I'm sensitive to angel numbers. I'm not I've tested them out. I see one particular number a lot, and when I do it, it indicates kind of how whatever I'm praying about lately or whatever I'm going through might go, because it'll like that angel number with a number attached to it might mean something else. Like this is going to happen, but you might not like how, or hang on for the ride because it's going to happen. Just you may have to go through something first. But yeah, far as my claim to fame to paranormal goes, I'm real sensitive to angel numbers. That's big with me. If I'm going through stress, I'll look for those and they do appear if something's bothering me.
You think that's a message of some sort?
Mm-hmm. I think it's for lack of a better term, spirit guides. I don't know what they are. It sounds kind of shamanistic a little bit, but I think it's kind of a guide saying, you know, you're going to be okay, especially if you're feeling stressed about things. Like I started noticing it when I went through a 50% pay cut, and like I thought like my life was over, and I started seeing one particular number and it repeated. I would watch a TV show, it'd be on there, be on the license plates, and sure enough, that number became my salary at my next job when I left that place. And then I quit seeing that number. It went away. And then I started seeing another number, which is my main number now. And looking back, that was my grandparents' number. It's in my wife's telephone number growing up. It's in both of my grandparents had the number in their telephone number. My wife had it when I met her. And so it's across the board. Like I follow it when I see it in something. If I'm going through an issue at work, there'll be a piece of code come out, like the serial number of something that's messed up. I'll have that number in it and I'll know, oh, this is going to be fine. And sure enough, 100% of the time, it's fine. I don't understand why it works. Maybe I'm just noticing it and that's what they use. Maybe they just double down on what works. Kind of like when you podcast, you double down like I did on Bigfoot. But for some reason, I'm looking them up and there's several websites. You look up your angel number and it'll tell you what it means. And sure enough, most of the time, it pretty much correlates with what's going on.
Well, interesting.
I recommend anybody who thinks they see a certain number that they think is meant for them to look it up. Just Google angel number like 42, and and most of the time it'll be what you're going through.
Well, let's get back to cryptids and Bigfoot. Do you go out and research at all?
I go out in the woods. I don't go out and research. I didn't know until this last year. Like I started my Randy Bigfoot episode aired 1 year ago Friday, and I didn't know until I met all these guys over this past year that people could do it successfully. Like I've heard of people going out there, oh, we're looking for Bigfoot, which means they were consuming beverages or something. I didn't realize there were signs you could look for. I didn't realize there were strategies you could do to maybe find a hotbed, so such as a river or a river with a hollow next to it where you could see like around it, and certain places you could camp, maybe cook bacon. So no, I don't research, but it's coming real close. I've got 2 trips coming up in November where I'm going to go try to with some fairly well-known researchers to see what it's actually like. But I would like to actually have an experience.
You're trying to have an experience anyway and learning more about the research itself.
Yeah, I don't want to go somewhere where like some crazy person puts on a suit and like, oh, that's funny, like it's a prank. I want to like I'm more interested right now. Like, sure, I'd like to see the full body. Who wouldn't? You know, the Holy Grail. But I'm more interested right now in the validity of the whoops and the knocking and the screams and the howls. Like I grew up in rural Alabama on the side of a mountain or a little ridge there. And so if someone came from like New York City and was doing it, like, oh, what was that? I don't know what that noise is. I would know what that noise was for the most part. And so I'm interested in that because I've camped a lot. I've hung out in the woods a lot, deer hunted a lot. And so I want to see what the noise is that I'm not hearing. And if it happens, I'm going to freak out because I'll be like, I'm pretty knowledgeable. I was on the forestry team in high school, FFA officer. So if something like that happens and I can't identify it, that's going to make my heart race. I'm going to get some adrenaline from that. That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, I wish you luck on finding something. There's so many reports these days where people do have some kind of an encounter, whether it be a physical, visual, or some kind of a sound. Whether it be accidental or on purpose researching, people are just having more and more experiences. Why do you think that is?
I think we're more open to it now. It may be the fact that more people are reporting them now as well. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have done this podcast. I wouldn't have even considered a paranormal show. But now you mentioned you have a paranormal show, and they're like, oh, you'll get a couple of scoffs and laughs, and you'll hear like the third person you tell about it. Oh, my grandparents lived in a haunted house. I remember seeing stuff growing up. That didn't used to happen. I think the world's more open to it since we're kind of all trauma bonded after COVID. I think that there's more people willing to talk. The internet's here. You got the reach of the stories are farther. People who live in backcountry can actually tell their story over a phone. It's I think it's as simple as that. There's more people who are open, and there's more availability to tell the story now.
What's your favorite part of doing your? Go ahead.
Oh, well, a lot of the stories I get are from like the 70s and 80s, and so it's not like stuff that just happened 2018 or anything. It's stuff that's been around for a long time.
Sure. What's your favorite part of doing your podcast?
Oh, probably just hearing the stories. I started it for the stories, and I like meeting new folks when they come on here. I call them instant best friends. Some of them are completely insane. I don't want to see them again, but most of them I want to see again and talk to them. The fellowship and how everybody helps each other. That podcast world I didn't know existed. Started digging in, and like you'll reach out to people and they'll send 2 or 3 people your way. You'll meet guys who you saw on TV. But the deep down is the stories and the conversation, and just because I grew up hanging out at this old country store, so it reminds me of that. I think that's what I kind of think it was what I was meant to do, is just sit around and talk. I know that's a kind of sounds kind of a lazy man's niche, but I think that's like because I was always on the technical side of things. I always like technology and computers, and this is kind of a mixture of both of those things.
My favorite things that hearing those stories, they're so genuine, so real, such there's no reason for them to make this up. They're not looking for fame and fortune off of it, but they're just genuine people, like you said. It's just good stories, just really good stories. I enjoy that too. That part of mine.
It really is, and you can tell you can tell that they're not trying to be a charlatan or anything, because as hard as it is to get some of these people to do it, and some of them have horrible internet, some of them have bad phones, they don't know how to use it. And so they're not like, I'm going to make this up and be extremely difficult about it. usually someone with they're trying to fake something. They got everything ready to go for you. You usually have to wedge a charlatan, like coax the charlatan out of its hole.
That's true. Absolutely right. And consistency of their story. That also stands true. That
the
it's
Bigfoot witnesses are all consistent.
Yeah, consistency is important with all of this too. What else can you tell me? What else is lurking back there in your knowledge from all of this research that you've done with the interviews and now getting out in the woods?
I'll tell you, one of the most fun things I've learned from the interviews is that Mexico is full of old legends, and it goes deeper than I thought it did. Anytime I can hear something that happens like in the desert, like in I'm not saying the desert of Arizona and New Mexico are part of Mexico, but like geographically, they're kind of the same thing. All the wild stuff that goes on out there, like you got down in Mexico, you got the puckwudgie and the chupacabra, and they have like a whole myriad of cryptids. There's one guy that's all he does is talk about Mexican cryptids, and just all the ancient societies saw them, and makes you wonder if like it has any correlation to how all our Native American stories have Bigfoot in them. And the little people. Like, was there a time when there was just open portals left and right, going back and forth? Maybe it lends credence to the cave systems being more open back then, since we haven't subdivided the whole world, given credence to the pure flesh and blood world. But it's just the amount of cryptids out there. That's one of the crazy things. It almost overwhelms you.
Well, it does. It is amazing. And, I've traveled some and also looking for various cryptids, and other countries do seem to have more of this ability to see them or interact with them than we do here in the United States. Part of that just may be the way that our minds have developed through technology and just the use of what parts of our minds we're actually using, and we can't see them anymore, really interact as
negative energy.
Yeah, just a different way of interacting with our world, our life. So they may not be as available to us even.
Yeah, and like stuff like the Mothman, like what is that? just appearing before bad things happen,
It's
and
almost like an
everybody's
omen.
seeing, yeah, everybody's seeing the same thing with the Men in Black, and you got Indrid Cold popping up there at the same time. That's a
Yeah,
that's a whole
strange.
that's a doctoral field of study right there. You don't even know where it starts,
Absolutely.
where it ends.
There are many, many strange
Mhm.
things in the world that we do not understand or comprehend. That's for sure.
I
Anything
think
else you
Bigfoot's
can?
my favorite. So I think Bigfoot's my favorite because it's the safest. The rest of them are terrifying. Like, what's a dog man? They rip you to
The rest of
shreds.
them are unexplained. Yeah.
Bigfoot's like a teddy bear. Like, if it's real or if it's not, uh, it's not really going to do anything to you if you see one. It's just going to walk, you know. But if you see a dog man, it may rip your cabin door off.